Right, we've finished our little muzzle piece and we're now going to work on the left cheek of the bunny. So I'm going to show you my flat version here. That's this cheek that we will be working. We're going to use the cinnamon yarn and we're going to be knitting this part here, and you will see that it starts off straight and it bends a little to the left. That is because we're going to be using, very excitingly, short row shaping. Short rows. So what that means is part of the row gets knit more times than the other part of the row, which creates kind of a wedge and helps you turn this corner. So I've done a video of what short rows are made with, which is the wrapping and turning of stitches. So do have a look at that if you're not sure, because we will be using it in anger on this part, and I will show you it, but we perhaps won't be quite as thorough as in the standalone video, because it is a good technique to learn. So do take some time to look at that if you can. So if we look at our little piece that we've made already, you can see it's like that little bow tie part that sits across there, and we're going to start by picking up stitches along this edge. Right, so here's my little muzzle piece, and it is knit side up or right side up. That's the wrong side, that's the pearl side. You can see the wavy lines there for the pearls. So this is knit side up, and I am going to turn it, and we're going to start picking up our stitches at the is it the cheek marker? Yeah, the cheek marker. Okay, now we finished this part with 15 stitches, but we only need to pick up 12 here, so we've got to miss a couple out. So let me just show you. We're obviously going to use our cinnamon yarn, by the way. Let's use that, and we need our needles. And just to let you know, I've changed my needles to some much shorter ones just for the purposes of the videos, just because I couldn't fit the longer ones all in to show you. So there's no sinister reason for that at all, except logistics. So we've got 15 stitches that we've finished. We only need 12. If we look closely at our stitches, you can see the V's, the little V's that make up the stitches here. So there's a line of V's that go up there and culminate there. If I put my needle through, now that is where I would like to be putting my needle to pick up the stitches, and that's going to work really well. All it means is because I've got a few more than I need, I'm just going to have to miss some out as I work across the top. And here's a little tip which I found really useful. If I look at that piece, I've got to work out how to kind of nice and evenly pick up 12 stitches. That's quite a lot for me to try and get my brain around where to put what. So if you want to, you can sort of chunk this space up into smaller bits. So if I fold it in half and get a stitch marker, or in my case I've got safety pins, if I pop a little safety pin in sort of halfway along, around about there, I've now got only 6 stitches to worry about in a much smaller space. And this works really well, particularly if you're working a larger piece and you've got hundreds of stitches. This works really, really well. You can go as small as you want. You could do it again if you like and put another pin in and say, right, now I know I've got 3 and 3, but this is okay. This is workable. I always make sure to put 1 stitch in each end. Okay, so that's already the position of my first stitch is already taken care of for me. Then I know, so I need kind of 12, so half of that is 6. I'm going to definitely put 1 in that end. So I know I've only got to find 5 between that small space. And it becomes much easier to handle. So that's a little tip for you. Okay, so picking up and knitting, what does that look like? Well, first of all, I'm going to just remove the marker from the corner because we don't need that anymore for now. And all it is pulling a loop through the work. Okay, so it's not kind of knitting as we are used to it, if you like. So I'm going to put my needle tip through this little V here. I realise this is kind of loose a bit going on at the edge. I'm not going to go into there because it will create, I think, a bit of a gap. So I'm actually going to go through these 2 pieces here. And here comes the picking up and knitting part. I've got my yarn ready, sort of, and I'm just putting a loop around the end of the needle and pulling through. All right, and that is 1 stitch picked up and indeed knit. So I know this is halfway, and I know I've got to do 6 in total on this side of the work. So here's 1, and if I look at my V's here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, that's nice and neat. I'm going to go into each of these V's across till I get to that pin. Let's do that. So again, my needle just goes through that V, and this time the working yarn is now attached, so I just go round the needle. Oh, drop it all. Let's do that again. Go round the needle and pull through. Okay, and again, needle goes through the V of the stitch. Yarn goes round the needle and pull through, and there's 3 on the needle. And that is all I'm going to do all the way along to pick up my 12 stitches in total. Okay, and if I sort of fold that edge back, you can see that it very much will give the impression that we're just continuing knitting, but in a different colour. All right, so I'll carry on and I will see you once I've picked up 12. Right, I've got 11 so far. Let's go for the last one. So I'm going to just try and get into that corner, right into there, yarn round and pull through. Right, so we've got 12 stitches on our needle, picked up and knit, and we're ready to start knitting left cheek. Row 1 is a purl row, so if you just look from the back side, you can see the top edge of the piece of work where we picked up and knit our stitches. It's kind of folded that cast off edge down neatly, and we're now going to just purl 8 and then purl 2 together twice. We're going to decrease our stitches immediately down to 10. So nice and straightforward. I'm just going to purl along, and I'll just show you purling 2 together. That's really the only thing of interest on this row. Okay, so I've purled 8 in a normal way, and now purling 2 together, which we've already done actually, haven't we, on the muzzle, but never mind. So just putting my needle through 2 stitches at once. You can see 2 there. And wrapping the yarn, and off it goes, and the same thing again. Okay, everything will have a little tighten up. It's all new at the moment, and that is row 1 complete. So row 2, bizarrely, we're going to increase it again. So we've gone down and we're coming back up again. Okay, so we're going to knit front and back, which I think we also did on the last bit, but let me show you again quickly. So knit put your needle into the front of the stitch in the normal way. Don't worry about these ends, as I've told you at outset. We're going to hang on to all the ends because they're going to form part of the stuffing, which is so great. So knit into the front in the normal way, but rather than pulling that stitch right off the needle, I'm going to put my needle around the back of the stitch and knit into the back of it. Okay. And now, where there was 1, there is 2, and I can now take it off of my needle. So I'm not doing anything else now. I've knit front and back. I'm now going to knit to the last stitch and do that again. Okay, so once again, knit front and back, knit into the front of the stitch in the normal way, put the needle around the back, go into the back of the stitch and knit. Okay, so that there was row 2. Row 3 is a purl. Okay, and then I think that those last 2 rows, so that increase row and this purl row, we're going to repeat them a couple of times. So just like I said, row 3, normal purl row all the way across. Right, so row 3, I've just finished purling. So all you need to do now until the end of row 7 is you're just going to repeat row 2 and 3 2 more times. And by the end of that, you should have 16 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to repeat the last 2 rows twice, check I've got 16 stitches, and then we will be having a look at short row shaping. Right, okay, I have completed rows up to and including row 7 of Bunny's left cheek. So I've now got 16 stitches on the needle, and I'm ready to start the short row section to shape the jowl. So if you recall on our sample piece here, this is where we're going to start creating that little wedge that's going to shape the cheek and the jowl. Give him a little lovely little chunky chops. That's a technical term. Right, so as I've mentioned before, I have done a more involved wrap and turn video at the beginning of these videos. If you want to have a look at that, please do, but we'll just go over it again here. To start with, we're told to just knit 9 stitches normally, so nothing scary or confusing about that. Let's go ahead and do that. 8 and 9, and we've now got the abbreviation W and TK. That means we've got to wrap and turn knitwise. So we're not going to knit our next stitch, we're wrapping it. So I'm going to bring the yarn forward between the needles. I'm going to slip the stitch from the left needle to the right needle. I'm going to bring the yarn to the back again, and then slip the stitch again back onto the left needle. So that's wrapped that stitch knitwise, and you can see it's now got its little collar around it. Don't forget, we've got a much more detailed video if you want to go through that slowly, but that is wrapping and turning. And so that was short row 1, that's done. So the turning is happening right now, and that means we are now in a position to work short row 2, which is quite simply purling. Right, so I've just finished short row 2, which was just purling 9 across, and I'm going to turn again and start short row 3, which is another one where we've got to wrap and turn and knit stitch. And I'm just going to show you one more time, and then I will finish off the short row piece. So this time round, we're going to only knit 8 stitches before we wrap and turn. So I'll get to 8 stitches, and then we'll wrap that knit stitch again. 6 and 7. And now this is number 8. And if you can see a gap between this stitch and this stitch. That's the first one we wrapped. So we don't want to wrap that again. We're going to wrap the one before it, which is this one here. So yet again, I'm just going to bring my yarn to the front, slip my stitch from the left needle to the right needle, bring my yarn to the back again, and then slip the stitch back onto the left needle. Okay, so that's the wrapping, and here comes the turning, which is purely and simply turning our needles so that I can now purl back, and this will put me on to short row 4. So you're going to be working like that all the way through this piece. So I'm going to finish that, and I'm going to see you at the end of short row 10. Right, I've just finished short row number 10, and you can see very clearly just from the orientation of the knitting, if I put that down here, we did start picking up and knitting along this edge, so the actual knit part started like that. And when I put my needle like that, you can see very clearly that we've kind of created this wedge because we've worked these stitches more times than these ones over here, and that has shaped our Bunny's cheek. So we've kind of gone around the jowl. You can see a little kind of curve going on there, and that is the effect, the brilliant effect of short rows and wrapping and turning your stitches. So we're now on row 8 of Bunny's cheek, and it seems on the surface to be a very simple row because it is a knit row with just an increase on the last stitch, a knit front and back on the last stitch, which you're very used to doing. But one thing I wanted to make sure you're aware of here is that when you're working all the way along these knit row, all the way from front to back without turning and wrapping and all that sort of stuff, all those wraps that you've made of those stitches need to be picked up and knit as you go. Again, I have made a video to show you how to deal with those, but I'll just do it again anyway because it makes a real difference to how neat the finished article looks. Right, so for the first few stitches, we don't really have anything to worry about. They're straight knit stitches. We haven't wrapped them, but you will see your first knit stitch. Just look out for that little collar. Where are you? You're here. It can be tricky to spot them. They're really, there you go. They are quite tricky to spot. So if you feel that you want to put a stitch marker on, so you know which ones where they start, that's absolutely fine, because once they start, you know that you kind of got 5 to deal with. Okay, so you just need to know which is your first one, and I found mine there. All right, but like I said, pop a stitch marker in if you're not too sure. There's no problem with that. Now, if I look really closely, I can see, and it is tricky because the yarn is furry as well, so I can just see, if I point with my little needle tip here, just about, I can see that that is a collar going around this particular stitch. It is not a stitch that is sitting in the normal orientation. So that is the wrap that I created earlier, and I'm going to pick that up as I go along. So all I'm going to do, because I'm on the knit side, this is how we deal with them, I'm going to pick up, I'm going to put my needle tip, under the front part of that little wrap. Okay, you can see there. And without twisting it or doing anything at all, I'm just going to pop it up onto the left needle, so it sits up there in a sort of narrow V, if you like, with its partner that we've wrapped. And to keep it neat, I'm going to knit through the back of both of them. So I've put my needle into the back of the stitch, as you can see, and there's 2 threads of yarn, strands of yarn going over, and I'm just going to knit those 2 together. Okay, and so when I look at it from the front, you can't really see that wrap at all. It's popped through to the back and it's nice and neat and taken care of. So I'm going to do the same again with the next one along, because the next few stitches are wrapped stitches. So I've put my needle tip underneath, popping it on the top of that left needle like so, and then just knitting in the back. All right, and that is how I'm going to deal with all of the wrap stitches as I go along, making a nice neat finish on the front. So all you actually can see is a sort of slight change of direction of those stitches, and that's what we want. We don't want any loops or holes or anything like that, and that's what that picking up and knitting method will give you. Okay, so I've got 2 more to do, and then it's a straight knit to the end. Okay, I'm on the last stitch, so I'm just going to knit front and back. Okay, and that should leave me with 17 stitches, and I'm going to put a stitch marker at the end for left face front marker. That's easy for me to say, isn't it? So I'm just going to pop a stitch marker in there, and then we'll move on to starting the eye socket.